crisis responses, which is pretty unusual in my work as well. So they've ranged from the bushfires at the start of the year, COVID overseas, to global cyber attacks, a tropical cyclone during COVID throughout the Southwest Pacific, and more recently a major IT outage and significant issues related with all of those. And all of those sort of things, I think, really conspire to remind us about the importance of trust, and especially in your field as leaders in your profession, being a trusted advisor is a really important status that all of us, whether we're consulting or service providers, legal practitioners or otherwise, often are aspiring towards. And I think trust really is at the core then of everything that we do and everything about the way that we lead and the way that we engage as teams. And I think what I've done more recently is sort of been reflecting on that, and some of the stuff I'm going to take you through today is a bit specific around the cyber crisis and the impacts there, to give you some awareness around some of the challenges that really do come through here. But more broadly, to talk about some of the considerations for being a trusted advisor, and then B, performing a role supporting your clients in often very difficult situations themselves. And no doubt you've been living and breathing that over the last 10 months or so. This is a bit of a model that talks about trusted organisations and the different status that they will come into, and particularly when you're dealing with a crisis, it looks at often the ones who are underprepared or don't have a great deal of trust are really that bottom three. So they're chaotic, they can be reactive, they can be directive. I'm sure some of you will automatically will take your mind to a client that will take you to that moment. You think, yeah, they're in that sort of mode. Command and control is an effective tool, particularly when you're trying to get control of a situation, but normally it's actually very difficult to really manage, particularly at scale. And we're seeing some of the challenges with that with the Victorian government response at the moment, and the command and control considerations or issues that's been exposed in that particular response. But trusted organisations, trusted leaders, trusted teams have strong process, they're collaborative, they're proactive, and they use risk to adjust and adapt to any situations that may confront them. And that aspiration of being adaptive, particularly when you're talking about a crisis situation or an impending issue coming towards you, is really where we want to try and get both yourselves and your clients to in any situation. Now, if we think about what goes behind that, it's a really good metaphor I've found for determining the difference between, particularly when we're looking at a cyber world. And here's my son, Sumit, and a few of you will know him. Meg, that's Angus now, 14-year-old boy, loves his gaming. In the developers world, gamification has two components to it. It has mechanics and has dynamics. So the mechanics are the actual physical things that are put in place, or the mechanisms that they're putting in place to really create certain outcomes for the user and as part of their experience. And the dynamics are actually the rewards that they talk about. If we transfer that though into the real world, the mechanics are really what we're doing around the structure, the processes, and the things that we're doing to prevent things going, or what we do to prepare, and the way we set up for a team. And in this context, Ross Lyon's quote is the same: it's mechanics and dynamics. And the dynamics are actually the relationships, the interrelationships between individuals as they're navigating through different situations. We translate that to a cyber risk environment. We're looking at IT having a zero trust model. So what that means is that they're applying zero trust at scale to prevent any threats from externals. They're creating an island, you've got VPNs, you've got all these technical components, which are really the mechanics of a situation. However, it's really the dynamics of the teams and the individuals and the way that you're interplaying with IT, or most importantly, with your customers, that really matters. Now, I did a security risk assessment for a client late last year, and it involved me basically gaining access to their building, or seeing which way I could go about gaining access to their building. It was part of a wider assessment looking at crisis preparedness and business continuity planning, information management and the like. And so I managed to go through the basement, waited in line at the elevator down the bottom, got into the elevator, went up to the floor where I knew they were operating from. They had 2 floors on this particular building that they were operating from. I then got out of the elevator, waited for a moment, saw someone come in and left the door open. So I was able to actually ghost and go behind him and follow that person into the bathroom. Went to the toilet, pretended to go to the bathroom, came out, washed my hands, walked out, and here I am on the floor. It demonstrated the fact that there's this inherent trust that we've got in people, and the inherent trust that we've got in people and in enabling them. People saw me, they didn't challenge me along the way there. Now, if I was a threat actor, had the intent to remove information, I could have quite easily taken what would have been a pretty unwieldy file, mind you, and take that with me, or even do something other than nefarious act. Now, that was a physical threat. What we're dealing with in the virtual world, though, is that we're essentially, what you could say is that it'd be like you going over to a client's place for a dinner and leaving the back door open and they get robbed as a result of your presence being there. Now, let's look at what impact that would have on you from a trust perspective with that client. You know, there's a potential loss of impact. There's a loss of financials. There's a potential impact on obviously on the reputation for yourselves, but then there's a wider impact on the wider clients who are no doubt aware of it. Now, this is a difference that we start to think about when we're talking about the programs that you're going through and why it's important around password protections, why it's important around multi-factor authentication, why it's important about restricting certain components of information. It's not because, you know, you want to just be compliant. It's not just because you want to be prepared. It's just because you care. Now, you care enough in your day-to-day jobs about the work that you're doing. So why would you permit that access to someone like me or other nefarious actors who you may not even know by some careless actions, by not following the normal protocols that you've got? Threat environment now is being quite significantly impacted, and I've been, as I said before, directly involved in the 2 global cyber attacks. One had a major outage across their whole business globally. Second one, same effect operationally, but it also included a data breach. Both of those extremely difficult challenges to manage. And I suppose what I want to talk you through is some of the impacts that happens with these things and what goes on behind the scenes and what the actual environment looks like, because they're looking for people like us. They're looking for people like you. They're looking for people like me. They're looking to socially engineer contact with you in some way, shape or form, create some sort of access control, some access they can gain either physically, as I demonstrated with penetration tests, or virtually where you won't even realize it. And then they're looking at gaining access to your information, your clients, or any data that you may have that may be of importance and value to you, because they know that organizations like law firms are dealing with things like escrows. They're dealing with transactions. They're dealing with bank transfers. They're dealing with difficult matters that may have commercially sensitive information. You're dealing with clients who are often in crisis. So you've got sensitive information that you're maintaining on their behalves. So you're a really, really good target for these nefarious actors, and these threat actors are looking to try and gain access. They also know that lawyers are not great with IT, and they know that that there's not always been that compliance with things like those password protections. So they know that you are a target-rich environment. So these are some of the challenges that we've seen, and we know that the profile is lifted around this, and there's 1.5 billion that's been spent now or been announced the other day as part of the wider support packages out there. What you've seen is that there's significant events occurring globally from threat actors overseas, but there's also a whole lot of activity which is really happening around malicious or criminal attacks. So don't just think about it as being Russia, China, or whatever other stereotype that we always think about. This is not just nation-state actors that are acting on these on these matters. These are all criminals primarily who are looking to gain financial gain out of their acts. And the problem with it is they're able to do it at scale. So they don't even need to try and access through the basement Rialto anymore. They can do this from the safety and well-being of their own home. Now you'll note these are the stats from last year from the Office of the Australian Information Commission. These are stats now that are part of the wider reporting that goes on for mandatory data breach, which is fantastic because we're now starting to catch up to where health and safety was probably 10, 15 years ago around mandatory reporting. So we're starting to see a lot more of these acts that are coming through, and we're starting to get a better understanding of the profile of the attackers as a result. And maybe not the profile of the individual attackers, but more the types and natures of the attacks that are happening. And you'll see malicious or criminal attack being there. We've got it up by 2% this last year. Human errors down, but that's coming with greater awareness. And you're still seeing some system faults. Now, this is broken down by the top 5 industry sectors, and you guys will note that you are rating in there at about 3rd. And there's been some pretty significant attacks over the years, particularly where they're gaining access and monitoring your internal communications, not yours, but in general law firms, communications and external communications, particularly on accounts. And they're going through and simply changing account details or other sort of bank details on accounts that are being sent out to a client. And by the time that the clearance, for example, if it's a payment over a weekend or a payment on a Friday that's going into an account that's not clearing until Monday or Tuesday, by the time they feed back to the accounts people that has it been paid and confirming that it has, it's already been transferred and the money's been withdrawn already behind the scenes. So within that short window, they're able to monitor what's going on. And they're generally doing that access through social engineering. So looking at your other profiles, using passwords that you use on other systems or solutions, and using that as an access point to your just your simple email accounts, and then monitoring your traffic and then picking an opportune time to strike. One of the other, some of the other sort of information, or this is more around the kinds of information that they're really attacking or seeking or trying to gain access to. The contact information is an important one because that's part of the social engineering components, and that's generally on-sold on the black market, on the dark web. Financial details, again, are important ones because, again, it enables them to either make simple changes like I mentioned before, or more complex transactional changes where they're then, again, still gaining access to that funding, which is their primary gain or primary aim. Identity information, health information, tax file numbers, etc., etc. These are all referred to, and some of you no doubt will have really good awareness of these through your work that you're doing, or also through the clients that you've dealt with around personally identifiable information. The other sensitive information is really commercially sensitive style information. So CSI is the other three-letter acronym you might hear. And commercially sensitive information is often, again, being gained in order to understand a particular strategy, tactic, or dealing, or also to garner a ransomware demand, which is often the stake they're putting out at the start. So the key question for you all, and the key question I ask a lot of my clients is, why are we leaving it all just to the mechanics, to the IT guys to solve the problem, when all the dynamics really orientate towards us as being the access point, or us as being the weak point, and also us and you yourselves being the interface with your clients if something were to go wrong. So what I'm going to walk you through is really what happens in some of these situations and how quickly it scales and how quickly you need to be on your game and prepared and willing to respond and able to respond very effectively if it does strike. What happens in a strike? You may have various different forms of attack, whether it be a cyber attack or a ransomware attack or otherwise, but either way the effects are often what you're seeing first. So you may not have access to systems. So you think of it, every day you come in, you log in, and I think a few weeks ago there was an outage for Microsoft, which affected everyone. And for a little while there, you might start ringing through the IT services team, what the hell's going on? At the same time, your IT services team are trying to quickly root cause, try and identify what the problem is. Now, in a ransomware situation, depending on the nature and type of attack, they may not have detected the threat and prevented it from occurring, which means that these shutdowns or systems down are occurring. Now, in those instances, root cause takes time. It's not like they can switch on and automatically, identify the source of the problem. So they're actually working through the problem in parallel with trying to also deal with the volume of inquiries that would be happening. So what we talk about there is a process to really ensure that everyone's briefed very quickly to ensure that they know that something's going wrong and the IT team are onto it, and they'll have a response back to you in good time. So that's what a good response would normally look like. Add on to that though, you might have the inability to communicate. So that ability to communicate might be limited because the systems that you normally rely on to do that are shut down. Everyone wants to know the impact on them straight away. So as word starts to proliferate around what's gone wrong or what the issue may be, as soon as you start to look at communicating either internally or with your clients, very quickly people want to know the impact of whatever the virus may be or whatever the incident may be. They want to know the impact on them. They want to understand the impact on the operations. They'll all ask you straight away, particularly clients, has this affected our operations? What is the nature and type of ransomware that you're dealing with? All these questions start to come back, and they build over time and become issues that you need to start continually dealing with. So your cyber crisis response needs to be really switched on. But all of this can be prevented if you follow the basic prevention protocols which Sarah and the team work through. All of them can be prevented to a degree, or then limited from the impact that it might have if you're taking the appropriate precautions. If you're the one that leaves that back door open so that when you're having dinner with your client in the front room, they get robbed, then how does that look for you as an organisation? How can you be trusted and assured to be part of a response or support to them, or more broadly, trusted to continue engagement with them or other clients that may be affected by this particular outage? What will happen also is all of you as those frontline of those engaged with your clients will receive a lot of misinformation. You'll have a lot of different demands and expectations from your clients. And unfortunately, what you'll be dealing with is an incomplete picture. So as I said before, root cause takes time. The ability to understand the multitude of issues and then start restoration schedules, etc., takes time. If you've had a data breach, trying to identify the specific data sets that have been accessed or exfiltrated is the language that's used, takes time. And you can imagine the difficulty with all the different file structures that you may have within your own drives, let alone across different servers, across different cloud-based infrastructure or otherwise as well. All of that takes time when you're dealing with, at the same time, a whole tsunami of customer impact and customer inquiries, as well as your own employees who are on one or other end of the extremes, either catastrophizing over what the impact may be on their own personal data, or on the other hand, might be pretty nonchalant about the fact that some of that information may be gone. So you've got to deal with all those different emotions that are going with this at the same time as dealing with a physical restoration as well as the virtual restoration from the event. So some of the risks that you talk about, now some of these may not be as specific to you because particularly where you're looking at end consumer data. I'm not sure whether that's something that's totally relevant for you guys, but it's really your customers' data. So think about it in those terms if that's not entirely relevant for you. There's suppliers and contractors, obviously, and the data and the business continuity impacts with them. There's a desire for them to understand what they need to continue to support you with or otherwise. Your owners and shareholders will no doubt be severely impacted. And then personally, the impact on each of you, particularly if you've had that really critical personally identifiable information like your tax file numbers, any of your passports, etc., you may retain for travel components, your own financials, your own account details for escrows and everything else that might be in place. All those things mean that you've got to deal with the whole myriad of different impacts on the different stakeholders, not just the external stakeholders or media or otherwise that might come into play. The other important ones for you guys, and because of whom you're dealing with, will be the likes of the Office of the Australian Information Commission. So they're the Mandatory Data Breach Notification Group. GDPR if you're dealing with external data for overseas stakeholders or overseas clients, and the jurisdiction on those you would be better advised at understanding than me. Importantly now, because of the work that you do with financial institutions or otherwise as well, APRA are another regulatory group that may be involved. ACSC, the Australian Cyber Security Centre, is a group that comes in to respond and support you through it. So they can physically come in some cases, or they virtually support remotely. Either way, they're a group that you want to get engaged pretty quickly as well as part of the response. But overall, you can see we're starting to develop quite a massive operation just to deal with what we think might be a pretty basic issue that I really don't want to change that password tomorrow. I can't be stuffed, or I forgot about, I've got the same password across multiple applications. That's just opening up that small little gateway for someone to ghost you back in, out of the elevator shaft, into the back door and into your office virtually, and start to access the information that you have. So the real question is, can you be trusted? Do you want to be that trusted advisor, or do you want to be the one that causes that break with that trusted relationship that you have with your clients? At the end of the day, the best measures that you can work through from a cyber security or cyber incident response point of view is really around prevention. So ensuring that you're following those protocols, the multi-factor authentication, the data that's really important, you're protecting it, you're protecting the crown jewels. You are applying the appropriate password policies and protocols are applied. Your physical security is on point, so that access could be to gain access to other information in order to access devices or otherwise that might have been available, and they certainly were available as I walked the floor that day. So prevention is the best form of response, or particularly for cyber events. And these probably really still also apply, these equally apply across other risk categories or other types of events as well, and particularly when we're talking about the preparedness. So the best way for you to build trust amongst each other is actually preparing hard and preparing for failure. So a lot of IT teams don't like to admit that, because we've spent good money on setting these systems up. We've sought the investment, and the business case has been put in place to receive that investment. But you need to plan as if it's all gone completely off. And if that happens, then you know how you're going to respond as a team, how you're going to communicate to each other without having access to the normal communications modes. WhatsApp groups, those sort of things are fantastic because they're not part of your normal platform. And they enable you to quickly get messages out to people to give them an understanding or awareness of what's going on. And the more empowered and the more aware people are, the more that they can start to manage their own response and the response across clients or otherwise that may have been affected. The big thing about response is about activating and managing at scale. So there's no point waiting too long to activate your team and then you're chasing your tail. You're in that really reactive mode if you stay in that, if you're taking too long to activate. So this is your core group coming together, your CMT, your crisis management team, and acting very quickly and proactively, and then starting to get control of the situation. It's all of you having their eyes open, ears open, and aware and ready to receive information that might be needed to be transmitted to your clients. It's also about having holding statements in place to manage expectations very early in the response. And then it's about having the appropriate empowerment for all of you to deal with the client interactions that no doubt will follow. But that comes at scale. And a good example where the scale of the problem hasn't been met is really here with the contact tracing in Victoria. The scale of that team didn't maintain its momentum, its set up in the initial suppression stages, and they've now been caught, really challenged by that second wave. The other important step here is about learning opportunities from every incident, near miss or otherwise, or actual events. And it's important that you're taking those opportunities, that if you have a near miss or you have some error that's happened, or you've had some conspicuous activity that might have been occurring with your accounts or messages, that you're reaching out and you're actually reporting it. And then you're actually using the opportunity to learn and debrief, because it helps your IT team, it helps others identify the particular threats. It's a mandatory reporting requirement anyway for if there is a breach, and you have to obviously go through the process to determine exactly what has been breached or if there has been one at all. But the point is, without that awareness early, people can't start to orientate themselves to what the threat may be and improve your posture so that you can prevent things from occurring. So cyber risk really is no different at the end of the day to some of the physical risks that we would normally be accustomed to. It is definitely, though, a big challenge and a very complex issue that you have to deal with, and one that I hope you never have to go through. At the end of the day, I want you guys, as well as all of our clients, to stay trusted in the eyes of all their clients and supportive throughout any particular event. And hopefully it gives you some insight today in some of the ways you can go about doing that. So Sarah, I'm happy to take any questions or any follow-up points from here.
Great, thanks. Thanks for that, Grant. And I really like the question, why are you leaving it to the IT to solve the problem? I thought that just hits the nail on the head on what the Cyber Awareness Month is. It's, IT are the ones that put this infrastructure in place, but it's up to everyone to help. So I do have the first question. If there was one takeaway piece of advice, what would you suggest that we each do or each remember to do?
I think the password one's probably the simplest one, and it's the most cost effective, and it's the one where it's simply just going into your different applications, whatever, LinkedIn, the apps that you're using, Facebook, whatever it is, just go in and make sure you've got a different password for each.
Yeah.
That's probably the one simple and most easiest preventative measure you can put in place right now.
And how do you feel about password managing tools to do that?
Yeah, I'm not au fait with the specific tools, but they are certainly more and more secure now too. So I think there's one called File Share. Is that the one that you got? What's the number? The one that you recommend there? Sorry, Sarah.
There's a couple. There's Lastpass, which I find is quite good, or OnePassword is quite good as well.
Yeah, that was the one I remembered there. Lastpass has been quite well used.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're very good tools. The other important one there is your home devices. So don't just think about it in terms of your own work devices. Think about your own personal devices and your kids as well. So no doubt a lot of you have got that challenge, particularly during COVID, where the kids are accessing Wi-Fi. They're using your passwords for different things. They're watching over your shoulder when you're punching it in. Go and change them. You need to have a separate password in place for your kids versus what you're doing. You can still enable the family sharing and those sort of applications, and you can still do the monitoring you need on what your kids are doing, but you need to maintain that separation between any system, any device, and any password.
Yeah.
That's Sumit here. Oh, sorry, Sarah, to jump in. Just related to what you were saying, have you seen anyone in an organisation being compromised through their home Wi-Fi network? Like most people would leave their Telstra password on their Wi-Fi network or on their modem. Has that kind of come up on your radar?
Not specifically, but the general advice is around accessing, public Wi-Fi networks, and that's a general avoid one as well. So, that would include, your Qantas's and those other sort of free Wi-Fis that you're accessing while you're in transit. I know that's a difficult one often, particularly if you're back in overseas travel again. They're a good mechanism when you're traveling overseas to save money, but they're equally picking up different data points from you as you're doing that, or using that as a nefarious way to gain access. So I don't know specifics of using personal ones, though.
Yeah, there is on that topic for the top tips session that we ran at the start of the month. You'll see on the Yammer security awareness, there's a playbook on conducting the self-health check and 12 tips, and it covers, how to avoid relying on that USB charging point. So always take a travel adapter with you, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's stuff that you don't really think of, but you just do. A bit of convenience, or I don't have the time. So it's those times that they catch up. I have another questions come in. So beyond the ID cards that we've recently implemented, are there any other easy suggestions for preventing tailgating?
It's a difficult one, and we're naturally trusting people, and particularly when you've got clients or otherwise others moving around your office as well at different points in time. I know you normally restrict them to those meeting rooms that you've got upstairs, but I think the key is now you've got the visual IDs. That's a really good way then to identify quickly. And either way, just talk to people. So the thing I do often say is that just ask a person, I haven't noticed you around here before. Can you please just show me your ID or show me your business pass, please, and use the challenge process. You don't have to be rude. You don't have to feel, I know it's an uncomfortable act a lot of times, but it demonstrates to visitors. So if you are concerned around impacting a visitor as an example, it does demonstrate to them though, the flip is that you are taking their data and their privacy and their information very seriously.
Yeah. Thanks. I have a lot of questions. So in a friendly place like Hall and Wilcox, how can we be proactive in preventing tailgating incidents like you mentioned? So I think, like you stated, introducing yourself and sussing out if that person does belong here and taking that initiative on yourself.
Or another one that's come in there about with the new IDs, aren't they not going to show that they are a HW employee? I wasn't aware about what your ID looks like, but the fact that you're carrying them or retaining them is probably is your first visual check. Some organisations that I do work with have like photos or other ID as part of that, and a lanyard which would also identify the organisation. There's mixed responses about that. There's definitely mixed bags about that. So it's a real horse for courses around the policy that you want to apply and the way that you want to apply it, particularly with those visual IDs as well. So if you've got a visual ID, it's a good way to check firstly. And if you can't see something that you'd normally see, just ask them the question.
I have another question here. If we connect through the firm's VPN connection, does that protect the connection even if we're using public Wi-Fi? I just want to make a comment. My first preference, if you are out in public, in Australia, hotspot your phone. Usually our data plans are quite large, and I know my network's quite secure, so I'll hotspot my phone, but then always use the Pulse VPN on the work computer. So Brent, what are your thoughts?
I'm hitting the limits of my technical knowledge on these guys. So yeah, I couldn't tell you the differences between the two or which way to go, but I do know that you want to avoid the Wi-Fi. So that's a general advisory point. To clarify, my expertise is really around helping organisations identify what the problems they may face, how they prepare for them, and then how they respond effectively and with confidence when something does go wrong.
Yeah.
IT, cyber security. I need to get the other experts to really focus on their expertise there.
Yeah. So I think turn on your hotspot. We've usually got lots of data, and what we're trying to download. We're not doing updates. We're just doing what we need to do. So hotspot your phone. We know it's safe, and then turn it off when you don't need it. Same with Bluetoothing. Turn it off when you're not using it. Another question: if you find someone who is tailgating, what do you do then? How would you recommend approaching that?
Well, I just first and foremost, obviously you want to identify the details of who they are, why they're there, and if they're not going to give you that information, you can escort them straight to the front desk and actually out of the building, or you've got security that can come from down. I can only talk to the Melbourne office, I'm sorry, so I haven't seen any of the other locations, but if you've got security there, you can have them escorted from there, or if they're not willing to leave, then you're obviously going to escalate and call the police. Yeah. If you're feeling threatened in any way, shape or form though, you obviously want to try and avoid any situations where it's going to inflame the situation, and just move them out of the area as quickly as possible in a safe way as possible. So observe them as they're moving out, but there's no need to touch them, and you want to try and avoid contact as much as possible.
Yeah, I think for most of the offices there are security, and I know in Brisbane there are duress buttons as well. So if you do feel threatened, there is a duress button that's being monitored. But yeah, generally casual conversation, look for IDs would be my suggestion. Another question, in the event we come across someone that is not Hall and Wilcox. There we go, we've kind of answered that one. Pius got a good question here. Given that most of us are working from home, what precautions can we take to be secure while working from home?
The big one is actually accessing any of the information you've got through your VPN. So that one's an important one. Just monitoring again the ones we were talking before about the other systems, the other applications that you're using. Make sure that you're changing the passwords on those. So that's the basic one across the board. If you've got multi-factor enabled for certain applications, then I highly recommend it. And in particular, if you're accounting staff or bookkeeping staff or otherwise, that are handling any sort of transactions, it's often best, now that you're not face-to-face in many circumstances now, if you're receiving a weird inquiry or something that looks a bit conspicuous, you're better off reaching out over the phone to the person who's requesting the transaction. You'll find there's a lot of spoofing going on either by SMS. So because you guys will publish your mobile numbers for your client interactions, it's pretty easy for people to go online and find out your mobile. And I do the same. I've got my mobile details on there. What they're able to do with simple applications, text applications, is actually mirror your message or your mobile number, send a message to someone saying, hey, I'm in a meeting at the moment, can you just transfer, 20 grand or 10 grand or whatever an amount, erroneous amount that would normally go into someone's pocket anyway. They'd work through a simple figure that they transfer across, and they ask for that transaction to occur whilst you're tied up in a meeting. And more often than not, people trust that, go ahead and do it, and then realise it wasn't the message that was sent from them at all. So the best way to go, again, is any of those weird or unusual or conspicuous sort of events, call the person to confirm, and then if not, report it immediately through the IT team.
And just on that note, calling the person direct, recommend contacting that person through your existing communication channels. Don't necessarily just look at the phone number that's on that email, because that can be redirected as well. So that is time. We're at the Q2 mark, so that was perfect timing. I really appreciate you coming along, Grant, and I think it's highlighted why we're running this Cybersecurity Month, and that we need, it's not just IT's problem, it's everyone's problem. Sumit, sorry, thank you. Sumit, did you have any final words before we disconnect?
No, terrific, Sarah. Thank you, Grant. Always, it's really worthwhile hearing from you, and thanks for your time, and look forward to catching up.
Yeah, thank you all, and thank you for having me along. If there's any other questions, I'm going to make available a copy of the Leaders Guide through Sarah, and yeah, I've got the podcast as well. So Crisis Talks is on all the different applications. Last interview was with Shane Fitzsimmons, which was a ripper, and a few more to follow here. So thanks very much for having me along today, guys. I really appreciate it, and look forward to hopefully seeing you all in person a lot sooner over the next few weeks.